In the 1950s, Kurt Richter, a professor at Johns Hopkins, performed a series of experiments where he measured the amount of time it took for rats to drown after being placed in a bucket. He expected that the rats would try to stay on the surface of the water for as long as possible. Yet in his first 2 experiments, most rats survived no more than a few minutes. In his 3rd experiment, Richter saved the rats just before they died. He helped them recover, and then put them back into the buckets. In the end, the rats swam for much longer than in the first experiment. Now the question here is why? My hypothesis is that this time the rats had hope they would be rescued. Rats and people are very different, but we heavily rely on hope as well. As a student like many of us here, I experienced the all too familiar routine of unfinished homework, overwhelming days, and too many extracurricular activities. I'd sometimes spend hours sitting at my desk fretting over my plans after high school. How many in the audience have ever felt like, despite trying your best every day, or despite reaching a goal you've worked for ages to achieve, you failed to see yourself with a feeling of pride? I felt so scared of the future because I believed that no matter what I did, I wouldn't be good enough to go to my dream college or make my parents proud. Yet when I asked myself what good enough meant, I could only define it as me being better than I am now, which led to this constant cycle of disappointment and unhappiness. For me, this yearning to be good enough took shape in my passion for coding. I would constantly compel myself to compete in hackathons, make new apps and websites, and apply coding to my school clubs and classes, even if it was a language arts class. This was great in that I learned a lot, challenged myself, and even won some competitions. But it was absolutely terrible for my physical and mental health. For instance, hackathons required me to sit at my computer for almost the whole weekend, and I'd stay up to 4 a.m. trying to get as much done as possible. In the end, if I didn't win anything, I'd feel I wasted my time and proved myself as less than enough. It is difficult to see our strengths. Too often, we define good enough by comparing ourselves to others, which means that we'll never be good enough, since it is impossible to be the best at everything. So to all the perfectionists and uncertain ones out there, I want to say, our lives are not doomed if we make a mistake. There's no need to be scared of failing because everything and any time is a good opportunity for change. When we realize that our thoughts are tangled up in our emotions, find a technique that helps you reset. Like Amanda Gorman, who in her TED Talk mentions how she repeats a mantra about her ancestors every time before a performance. I wish my technique was as cool as hers. I just slapped the back of my hands. Once our emotions aren't caught up in our thoughts, we can reflect on what is giving us anxiety. To judge how afraid of a situation we should be, think about the worst possible realistic consequence. Worried that you'll mess up during a presentation? Don't be. Your worst outcome is that nobody remembers what you said. Worried that you won't do well during an interview? No need. At worst, you might not get this job, but you can improve on yourself and get accepted for the next one you apply for. In the end, we can get up from any challenges that put us down, as long as we maintain a self-belief mindset. Only through self-belief can we see that our limit of achievement is higher than we expect, and we'll have the necessary confidence to hold onto our hopes and stay afloat in our challenges. You may be wondering about whether believing in yourself makes a real difference in overcoming a difficult part of life. My friend once worked for a senior who wrote off a heart attack as a small temporary problem for over half a day. When he finally visited the hospital, doctors told him it was a miracle he was alive, as most people people don't survive the first 3 to 4 hours of a heart attack. Perhaps because the man thought he wasn't in a life-threatening situation, he survived longer. Though I'm definitely not encouraging people to try to psych their way through a heart attack. Your mind is powerful. Use the power your mind has to support yourself and your endeavors. Don't doubt yourself. You know the most about how much you have overcome and achieved. We deserve to feel confident in our abilities. There are 2 main takeaways I want all of us to apply to our lives from this TED Talk. The first is to try our best at everything we want to do. Failing won't hurt us unless we allow it to cloud our self-belief and desire to improve. We don't need to be perfect, so don't feel afraid to push yourself beyond your limits. Remember that most of the time, as long as an effort was made, people will accept it. I speak from experience as a pianist who's been playing for about 11 years. Wrong notes are frowned upon because they lead to a pause in the music. During performances, any performer knows that whether you're a musician, speaker, actor, the show cannot stop. As I listen to others during piano recitals, I realize that the weakest performances are those that stop and give up in the middle. The second takeaway is to hold onto our hopes and confidence by believing in our abilities. Now, of course, we can't tell ourselves, I have the power, I can do it, to simply get through our challenges. But many of us doubt ourselves on whether we can accomplish a big goal, and oftentimes just a small task. The truth is, we have the ability to do so, we just don't know it. And this unknown creates this perceived limit that makes us stop and give up. Give yourself a chance to face your challenges. In the end, our challenges may seem impossible right now, but by seeing ourselves through a lens of self-belief, our obstacles won't seem as impossible as they initially appear to be. And in the end, unlike the unfortunate acts of Richter's experiment, we can stay afloat. Thank you.